Meine sehr verehrten Damen, meine Herren, ich möchte mich als erstes beim Schiller-Institut bedanken für die Einladung.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank the Schiller Institute to invite me to give here a presentation on the role of steel in the new Silk Road perspective. This is my theme for today's afternoon. I will try to give you my message. Look at this picture to demonstrate the importance of steel. Steel carries the world and steel moves the world. If you think for a moment we didn't have any steel, we wouldn't have any possibilities to go by rail, to drive a car, to fly a plane. It is without any limitations the working material number one. And steel is being produced in all kinds of different forms, especially the automotive industry is a big customer. If you look at the Volkswagen works at Wolfs, that's 4,000 cars, and that's per day, and that's 4,000 tons of steel per day that factory alone needs. And this all needs to be logistically coordinated. And without steel, nothing would move in the world. Now, if you compare the importance of steel as a material to other materials, you have left side the steel, the big columns for the year 2013, that's 1.6 billion tons of steel. And compared to that, you have aluminum with 107 million tons, and magnesium and plastics. Plastics is about 300 million tons. But you cannot build a car exclusively from plastics. And on the very right hand, you have these carbon fiber strengthened materials, which are just in the beginning. If you look at the development of world steel production, starting in 1900, I can comment this until 1950. It was a very slow growth of production, and only after the year 1915 the growth rose. And then in the 70s, 80s, and 90s there was a certain stagnation. It didn't grow a lot, and only after the year 2000 there is a explosive growth of steel production in China. If you look at China, China is number one in raw steel production worldwide, as I will show you with other graphics. And the development of China, just looking at this figure, you get an idea. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s, there were very, very few steel. And then and you have the explosive growth in 2000. And then below that, you have another curve, which is India, which is, as you can see, just picking up. And we will try to look at the difference between China and India in this respect. Here you can see this even more clearly. This is the curve of the yellow part of the curve was until 1979 very low and oscillating production of raw steel. And then in 89 there was a slow growth until 2000. There were 130 million tons, and then it really exploded. And if you look at India compared to that, you can see that steel was had not a big role. And then in 2005, the Indians started to develop new technologies to produce steel. And if you look at the fact that India, even today, is only producing 80 million tons of steel, this is not a lot compared to China, even though the population in both countries is getting more and more comparable. So I'm afraid that the development in India might develop slowly, because such decisions like in China, where they say we build a railroad from Shanghai to Beijing, they decided today and they do it tomorrow. While in India, if you do the same similar decision, and then it would take a lot more time. The Chinese have a much better situation, or the advantage that they can execute such decisions much faster. Now, if you look at the present situation in China and compare this to the other regions and add the other regions in the world, then you can see that on the right hand you have the year 2013. It's again the 1.6 billion tons, and this has doubled in the last 14 years, and China has within 10 years gained a market share of approximately 50%. So today the center of world steel production is in Asia. It used to be in the US. In the US it was in the 50s the center of world steel production, and then in the 70s and other you had the growth in Europe, and in this millennium they have it in Asia. The other big states, nations that are involved in steel production after China, the next one is the EU, but you can see this is a very big distance. And this has even, if you look at the red part, that's the German part of the production within the European Union. That's 45 million tons. This is what China produces in a half month. We need a full year, and they do it in 2 weeks. Then you have Japan, US, India. That's the 81 million tons. Then you have Russia, South Korea, Turkey, and Brazil. And that is the leading steel producers in the world. If you now ask how will this develop in the future, take a study by the OECD, which has been published. This study says that in the year 2000 we will have 2.5 billion tons of steel. I believe that it is rather high as an estimate. Just if you look at the present developments, that might be. But even if it's only 2.2 billion tons, that would be a massive increase. Well, to produce steel, you need to produce raw materials. And here you look at the production of iron ore, enriched iron ore. Many ores that come from a mine can immediately used for steel production, but there are mines that have not such a high percentage of iron, and they are run through a process which then gives enriched ore. And this is what we're looking at here. That's 2.3 billion tons that are produced steels, and there's no doubt that China in this respect is number one. China is producing itself a lot of iron ore, but they're also importing a lot from Australia and Brazil to enable themselves to steel production in China. Then an important energy source for this is the coke production, which is produced from steel coal, charcoal. This is here carbon. The carbon is used to reduce the iron ore to iron, and that creates carbon dioxide as part of that process. So as we have seen, China needs a lot of raw materials, and this is changing the world. China has picked up and developed relations in South America, like Argentina and Brazil. Brazil is here in blue. That's blue is the metal. It's mostly iron ore. While Argentina delivers food like soybeans. And then you have in other countries developing and delivering oil to China. What is missing is iron ore production and delivery from India to China. They have the Indians are. India is not selling as much iron ore to China because they're starting to use it using itself. Now here, if you look at the comparison of countries, you have China, India, US, and Germany. This is the most up-to-date. This is the population. China is 1.37 billions. India is 1.2, roughly 1.3 billion. People are living in India, and then the next, the United States, there are 321 million people, and Germany is rather small, with 81 million people. And if you look at the lower part of the graphics, you can see the area. The US have 9.8 million square kilometers, China 9.6, so that's roughly equivalent. And India is 3.3, that's 1/3 of the of the area, while Germany is 400,000 square kilometers. Here I have a few graphics to demonstrate the growth. That's how China has, they have the 5-year plan from 2000 to 2005. You can see how massively the amounts of in the production have risen. So steel 205 is like 400. The production of personal cars has risen massively by roughly 400%. Cement, the number of air conditions has massively increased, and personal computers, you have 11-fold increase. And here you have the political aims of China in respect to or regards to the theme of the Seidenstraße here. So here you can see the comparison of 2005 to 2010. You have a massive increase of BIP, which is the gross national product. And if you look at the urbanization, if this gives the impression that this is only 4%, but 4% of the Chinese population is about 100 million. So 100 million people more are now living in cities. And that means you have to build complete new cities. And that's where a lot of the steel goes. And even the aim to increase the area of forest by 2%, which is, if you look at the giant area of the country, it's really a lot. Well, there are weaknesses and problems in China's development. We don't want to overlook that. Here you can see the problems of agriculture, where the sins of the former governments have left bad heritage, which has created a mass unemployment in China. You have social tenants, you have not enough protection. Then the problem of privatizing bankrupt state corporations, the bankruptcy of the Chinese banking system, the rivalities between the local, regional, and central power, and you have less and less availability of resources, and obviously also the environmental protection is not enough. Now, we do need innovations, it's obvious. Not only the Indians and the Chinese need this, we in Europe need this too. And in the international to survive in international competition. And these situations will develop a higher efficiency in using resources, like the natural resources or capital resources or human resources. We have to be able to increase the efficiency of our economies. So you need new materials, new products, new production methods, and new applications. So this is a little bit more problematic in China, because if you look at thus giant growth rates like here, like in China, we couldn't handle it with our bureaucracy. Now look at this, an example of material innovation. This is taken from Volkswagen. The percent taken as an example, the Passat car type, and this is different classes of steel. Looking at the orange, that's parts of the roof and parts of the this is a very tough steel, which is not very, and that this means that the fire guards have to develop a new new cutters, because they can't cut this hardened steel. A very important part is the part of industry in the economic product of the society. Here in Germany, about 25% of the wealth is created in industrial production. If you look at Korea, Korea is far beyond 30%. But what I think is very critical, if you look at Great Britain, part of the industrial part of product is only 15%, and in France it's even less, like 12%. And this is really much less than in Germany. So the industrial strength is the strength of Germany, so that we can still produce a lot of a big part of our product in industry. Because at the fringe, there's a growth of poverty. And this is from the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung from June. Despite of economic growth, the number of people of poverty is increasing. Parents save food so that the children get fed. People don't heat, and that means that this is a result of that not enough part of the economic product is industrially produced. And we have to convince our politicians that we need to keep the 25% of industrial production as the economic. Another product is the question of energy supply. And here you can see there's an energy boom within the US. The production is massively increased by 100 million tons. And in the European Union is also the gas production increased. And there you can see that the new form of gas production has been introduced. The Americans have just 1/3 of the production prices because of this technology of fracking. And that could mean that because of these better energy prices, industry could move to America, while we have the burden of the renewable energies. Here you can see the gas prices. Fracking lets the gas prices tumble. So if you compare the gas prices in America is like 1/3 compared to Europe, and this is a big advantage in competition. And with that, I'm coming to my conclusion. Steel is material number one. The raw steel production is growing further. The Chinese have increased their capacities. China has 200 million tons too much. But also in Europe, we have too much steel production capacities. And that means that the prices are not what we need. China is steel producer number one. China needs high growth. India will not become a second China because of its bureaucracy. The raw materials have been so thank you for listening to me. I'm ready to answer a few questions right now, but otherwise I have to leave soon.
Dankeschön.